Welcome to the Resonance and Revenue Podcast. I am your host, Cam Snow.
And I am your co-host, Karla Snow. And Cam's actually going to do the intro this time because you are in for a real treat. Cam, tell them what we're going to do today.
Yes, this podcast is all about unmasking your message and stepping into the authenticity of who you are and the message that God gave you to speak into this world. And today we are going to talk about the 3 things that are necessary to begin the healing process. And when we say the healing process, we are talking about becoming grounded in who you are so that when you speak your message, you reach the people that you're meant to serve. So I'm going to be interviewing Karla a little bit. We called this podcast Resonance and Revenue because Karla helps people resonate with their audience by helping to move through emotional things that come up, all that mindset stuff. We're going to talk about thought worms today. Yeah, you heard it here first. And we'll talk about what it looks like to move this into tangible strategies for your business. So the context for this episode is Karla and I were talking about, all right, where do we want to go with this week's episode? And I said, hey, babe, what are you teaching your clients at the mental wellness facility that she works at here in Nashville? And she's like, oh, it's simple. It's the 3 things that you need to start healing. I was like, all right, I want to know. So babe, without further ado, what are those 3 things? Then maybe we can dive into a little bit of each one.
Yeah. It's the first thing that I tell people because a lot of times you've been told all kinds of different things, but at the end you've been told you need to take care of yourself. And you might have heard of self-care, self-love, but ultimately at the end of the day, all of that is just dead flowers to yourself if at the end of the day, there's no trust in yourself. Just like when you're in a relationship with someone and you've had a really bad fight, no, you don't just want flowers. No, you don't just want a half-assed journal page, right? And yet we are in the worst relationship with ourselves possible, especially when you have religious trauma, right? So
Woohoo.
kind of blow it wide open and say at the end of the day, we're healing your self-trust, because when that trust starts being healed, your body is wired for healing. So if you actually are able to trust your body and be able to be synchronized in the way that we were created to be, that is the foundational piece. And then by then, they're hooked. Want to know more?
I want to know more. So what I heard there was that, self-trust. We talk about all these things in entrepreneurship of marketing, sales, delivery, and mindset is kind of over everything, because you run into these mindset obstacles when it comes to being visible in your marketing, when it comes to speaking out your message, when it's different, you don't want to offend people. And what you're kind of saying is that there's this underlying layer here of self-trust. When you talk about self-trust, what does that actually mean? How would someone know if they are lacking self-trust?
If you can't honestly ask yourself, do I trust myself? And the answer is no, then you're being honest with yourself. Because trauma, some people like to call it sin, but I'm going to dance off of that word and speak on trauma or experiences. I actually call them events with my clients. There are events that happen, little t and big T events. And all of that creates little microchasms of self-betrayal, because we have literally grown up in an environment that says that you can't trust yourself. So it's not a matter of, hey, do I trust myself or not? It's if you think you trust yourself, then that means you haven't actually acknowledged the times when your trust has been broken. Right? If you don't have an answer to that, if you've never thought about that, you don't have to think very long to think, when was the last time you ever doubted yourself? who had comparisonitis. That's what I like to call imposter syndrome, is comparisonitis. Like anytime there is ever a discussion of anytime you step out of the frame of you were the guardian of your own knowledge and beauty and power, and that you choose how and in the way that it is perceived, all within your frame of reference, like that at the base of it is the key. And so the fact that when we were children, we did not have autonomy means that at some point or another, we had a sense of justice. Caregiver had a different sense of justice, but because you were a dependent, you had to surrender, which flippin' sucks. Especially if you've had a dark childhood like mine. And like that causes breakage because as a child, we are really good at perceiving things, but we are really bad at interpreting things. So instead of being like, I have to listen to them because they are part of the hierarchy, we don't understand that as children. That's a social construct, right? The hierarchy, why we have to listen to a parent. Like none of that is ingrained in children. It's not, okay? Like that this goes against their primal being, which is to survive. And so when in this world of trying to survive, if you've ever had an experience where your way wasn't the right answer, boom, breaking trust, self-betrayal. But here's the thing, that's happening on a subconscious level. Well, unless it's a really terrible decision, then you're probably very aware of it. But like this
Can I
could be on a
interject and
subconscious
ask a
level.
question here?
I got like really intensely like zoned in. So
Zoned in,
please.
hyper focused. So it sounds to me like part of what you're saying is that some of that break in self trust happened like before we were consciously aware of our ability to make choices at all. Like almost like
Yes.
in that caregiver dependent relationship, our own self trust was broken, almost like broken for us in some ways, because it's like, this is what I want or what I think I need. And the caregiver says, no, we're doing this instead. Is that kind of like landing on some of those
Yes
early?
and no. That's where like my personal belief of what sin is like they've just literally have done studies that in epigenetic studies where you can pass down trauma responses to the next generation. So I'm saying that because of the original sin, which was a break in trust, every being on this planet wakes up, aka is born into this physical plane, wakes up and has already endured the sin of betrayal of self.
Right.
Or
And
the
then that
trauma of
happens.
the betrayal of self. And it happens before it happens when the joining of like from conception, like all of that trauma, all of that knowledge, all of the legacy and the like survival responses that are super powerful and helpful, but also all of the unhelpful ones. And
Yeah.
it's actually meant to be very freeing that like each generation is like, you're actually meant to view past generations as like, what the hell were you thinking? That's actually literally part of your job. Not job, but like that's part of like the call to be a good steward of your resources and like your calling and all that jazz.
Yeah, there's something you said that I want to break down for the audience because not everybody may know what you mean when you say like our survival patterns. Because we're coming from a context where we've been working with entrepreneurs, we've been coaching for like 6 years now. And there's a lot of things that are just second nature for us to talk about. And so if you're listening and you're just like, what exactly is this that we're talking about? Can you break down for someone who has no awareness of what a survival pattern is and how that affects them in the day to day right now? Like, we're talking in the context maybe of your business. Maybe there's a survival pattern in your marketing or sales that's going on. But like, what is a survival pattern and how does it affect you like today?
The first thing I go to immediately, the one that's the easiest, is have you ever had a repeatable physical sensation happen where it's like you can kind of track, that's interesting. I get knots in my stomach when this happens, or I get a
Mm.
headache before blah, blah, blah.
Mm.
Or, man, I really struggle with anxiety early in the morning, or like there's some kind of pattern,
Yeah, like the Sunday
right?
scaries of like
Mm-hmm.
a Monday's coming, I'm not prepared, I'm feeling all this sensation of like I'm scared for the week to come
Yeah.
because of
I mean,
fear of
I'll give
uncertainty or
you,
whatever.
for sure. I mean, I'll give you an extreme example from a client that I used to work with, where they would they struggle with disassociation, and they struggle to really keep locked in the afternoons. And working with them and their primary therapist and all of that jazz, discovered that as a child the primary abuse happened at the same time that their anxiety would go through the roof, as an example.
I was saying that like in the present day, they would have anxiety about in the afternoons,
Unexplained anxiety.
unexplained anxiety, and turns out that there was trauma that happened to them on a consistent basis.
Hmm.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's fascinating.
So if there is a pattern that is reinforced long enough, good or bad, it's going to stick with you. So if you are not where you are, if you are not where you want to be, who you are today is not the person who's going to get there. Otherwise, you would already get there. Why? As one of my favorite mentors, Robert White, says, you always have the best information at hand. Like in the moment that you make a decision, you already have the best information that you could in that moment, right? Like that's why people say hindsight 2020, because like you
Right.
can always reevaluate
Yeah.
later.
You always make the best decision with the information you have in the moment,
Yeah.
which is really hard to hear, but it's a framework actually for giving grace to yourself and being able to look at your past decisions and make new choices, which actually that touches on something interesting. I'm glad you brought that up because one of the biggest problems that we see with entrepreneurs, and maybe it's just the people who have come to us, I don't know. But one of the things that we see with entrepreneurs is a desire to build a business or do something in a way that's not going to produce the kind of burnout that they just came out of. And it's like whatever that burnout situation was, it's almost like we're taught certain things about how to build a business. There's a lot of strategies out there. There's a lot of like mindset work. There's a lot of personal development that teaches you to do things in a certain way. And we've gone down that road. Like we spent like 200 grand on coaching, and there's a whole story there for a future podcast episode. And that burnout cliff that you go off of, on the other side of that cliff, when you've massively lost trust in yourself. And the question on your mind is, man, I want to build something new that doesn't produce that again. But what if it happens again? And now we really have to revisit what happened there to understand what was the break in trust. So I'm curious, from your experience with working with entrepreneurs and now working with a lot of non-entrepreneurs too, what seems to be kind of why that self-trust happened in that context? Like where did that come from for these entrepreneurs who go over that burnout cliff?
Ask me that question again in two
Because you have
seconds. I want
something
to
else.
interject that it's less about like you don't have the beauty of understanding that the quickest way to heal is through the body, is understanding that you don't have to go back to the past to release it. All you have to do is
Ooh.
introduce a new way of doing things that is better, and your body will naturally switch,
Can you say that
because
again for
it
the
is
people in the
literally
back?
designed to do that. So you don't like, yes, it is so helpful to process through stuff, because like you can't feel something if you're not willing to even look at it, right? Like if you're not even willing to go through it. So like please don't misunderstand me. I love talk therapy. I've been in talk therapy for over a decade. I love it. And also understand that that is also a trap, thinking that it has to be a certain way in order to heal. No, literally, tomorrow, listener, if you're like, there is no way I will ever think I am beautiful, I am telling you right now, tomorrow, if you had a life-changing experience where your full body got to understand that you are beautiful, girl, in that moment, your body would be like, hell no. This is what we've been missing. Like, I'm telling you, like, you are wired for healing because, well, this goes a little bit into my own belief of the fact of like who made you and like the beauty and the power that is actually inside you and each and every one of you that we can't even friggin' dream
Mm.
of the
Mm.
possibilities.
Man, that just brought up something for me because in our first episode we called it Unmasking Your Message, which I think we decided we're just going to make that the subtitle of the podcast, like Unmasking Your Message. And it's this idea of you've got this message that you want the world to hear, but it's buried under these layers of what Karla's talking about, these layers of broken self-trust, of self-betrayal, of I don't know if I can do this. It's so very deep that sometimes you're not even sure what it is, but you can feel it. And what Karla is saying that is so important, that so many business strategists miss, that so much of like the industry misses, is that in order to unmask, you have to do some healing. You got to mend those broken breaches in trust in order for you to fully step in and hold the message that you've been given, because it takes strong hands to hold that message. And it wasn't just given to anybody, it was given to you. Whatever that thing is. Commentate, please.
Preach it, Cam. Preach it. Yes, sirree.
Put some
Absolutely.
collagen in my coffee this morning.
Yeah. So, on keeping it real with you all, as we continuously try to do, some of the things of, I guess, I hope sounds freeing, if not, I'll explain, is like you don't have to spend another cent to achieve healing.
Oh my goodness.
I want to release that expectation. And yes, I technically get paid by people looking to be healed. I understand that dichotomy or whatever that word is.
It's a good word for it.
But like, ultimately, you don't have to pay another cent. Ultimately, continuously to experience opposite action, you have access to ChatGPT. There is radical acceptance.
Yeah.
We talk on this podcast about radical resonance as well. We talk about like just expose yourself to so many different kinds of ways of describing things, and you'll be that are not in your niche necessarily. Or maybe you're like, I'm not an entrepreneur, but this whole talk is like you're intrigued by it. Girl, you don't have to have a business to be here. Girl, you don't have to have you don't have to be a mom to be here. Like all of the labels, like it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, like what we truly are talking about is unmasking the world, because that is loving people the way that Jesus intends.
Yeah. Man, and like there's something so powerful in what you said. Like when you said like you don't have to spend another cent to get healing, like I felt that like right here as someone who has really struggled over the years with owning and sitting with my own authority, my own ability to make decisions, coming from a place where I put so much value in other people's opinions and in the value of somebody who was in quote unquote authority. And that had some really intense consequences in my life of outsourcing my own decision making and my authority, which ultimately meant outsourcing my voice. Because your voice is your ability to create. The seat of your authority lives right here. It is your ability to speak. The most important monumental movements of the world started with a single word. You know, we look at Martin Luther King Jr. with the I Have a Dream speech and just the impact of words, man. Like your message and your voice and speaking that, maybe right now it feels like you can't speak for whatever reason. And if that is the case, and as Karla just said, like you don't have to spend the money on healing, but community is so important in that process. And having support is just, you can't downplay how important it is to have support in that process. So there's a discernment that you need to have of where you're at in your journey. Is this something where you need to invest time, money, and energy into? Or is it a process for you to embark on by yourself. And either way, we're here to support that. We have resources, put those in the show notes for you to embark either on your own or with support. Both of those things are valid and valued, and you are worth unmasking your message. Ooh.
Oof. Ooh, ooh,
Oof.
ooh.
Mm. Mm. Why don't you take us home, babe? I think.
All right, folks. Thank you so much for being on this little journey with Convos with Cam and Karla, or also known as Unmasking Your Message, also known as Resonance and Revenue, because
All
we
of them.
love words
We
and
love it.
also hate them because they are also very limiting and constricting. And so we are a fan of jumping out of those boxes and just being like, we're whatever the hell we are today,
Mm.
because we commit and choose to be who we are and whatever that means each and every day. So if you're willing to come with us and be a part of that journey, then welcome. Love you all. And Cam, what else?
And if you want to stay connected with us, you can grab our Fireproof Entrepreneur course. It's entirely free. The link for that will be in the show notes. This is a course that Karla and I put together on how to identify and work through the 3 core lies that are keeping you stuck in your business. And stay tuned, like and subscribe. Right? This is going to get on YouTube as well to stay connected. And we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Bye, guys.